Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you very much to IDEA for inviting me to share our programme. It is absolutely, it's very much appreciated, and Irish Aid are thrilled that we're also continuing with this. So I know most of you know me, just in case you've missed it. I'm Fiona Duignan. I am the GCE Integration and EU Project Officer with Meath Partnership. It's a bit of a mouthful, but sure, there you go. The Connecting Cultures Sustaining Our World programme started this time last year, and I was recruited specifically for the role with Meath Partnership. And the programme is funded by Irish Aid, and it complements Meath Partnership in every way because we work with the most vulnerable in our communities and those at risk of social exclusion for whatever reason. And this particular programme was targeted at migrants, refugees and asylum seekers, primarily living in direct provision centres in County Meath. And it essentially, what it is that because Meath Partnership, our education and training department, is primarily focused on Erasmus programmes. And at the moment we have 18 programmes, and all mainly on Key Action 2, which is on education and knowledge sharing. But we were also keen to adopt the GCE approach throughout our organisation, as well as the education department. And I can reveal it's something top secret now and exclusive. We actually have a GCE project that's going to be starting in September, in which Meath Partnership are lead, and that's in conjunction as well with Development Perspective. So we're very excited about that. So just a quick overview on Connecting Culture, Sustaining Our World, GCE approach to inclusion and sustainability, shortened to Connecting Cultures, because again, we seem to be very au fait with very long titles for our projects. So this project was, again, to support community practitioners to raise awareness of GCE, because what we found is that people are aware of it, but they don't have the time or the resources to educate themselves or even to adopt that kind of approach into their training methods. We also wanted, again, to contribute to the inclusion efforts in County Meath. As you know, just because somebody wants to do it doesn't mean they know how or how to approach it. And essentially, we wanted to use GCE to fuel that and to bring it about for organisations and educators. So the main reason we did this is that, as you know, with Irish Aid applications, it was written in late 2022. And at the time of writing, there were 11,600 refugees in Ireland, and about 600 of them in Meath. The average length of time in direct provision centres was 2 years, and for many, one lady whom I met was over 8 years in direct provision. And just to tell you, this particular lady, her daughter was born while she's in direct provision. She's 8 years old, and she's never lived a day outside direct provision, so she doesn't know what it is to have a home. But anyway, I could get on my high horse there, and I don't want to distract you. And as you're aware, in the sector, we all know, like, we've got chronic overcrowding, like lack of facilities and everything. So we have run other projects that, with people in direct provision centres in Meath, and part of it was in volunteering. And what we discovered in that project is that people really wanted to continue that. So we came up then with the Connecting Cultures, like to bring about an all-inclusive, a holistic approach to it, not just for people in the centres. But what happened then after we were approved is obviously the unexpected and tragic situation with the Ukrainian war. And we now have well over 80,000 IPs in the country. And Meath, the population of that has shot to well over 1,500, and unfortunately it is continuing to rise. One of the direct provision centres that we used to work with had about 200 people in the centre from all different nationalities before the war. They have all been moved on. The capacity is increased to over 400, and they are 100% Ukrainian. We have discovered other centres as well that are now 100% Ukrainian, homeless shelters in the Navan area are all hosting Ukrainian people as well. Now, to an extent, it did obviously presented a language barrier, but at the same time, it actually made things easier for us because we translated into one language. And we're lucky that we have two employees who speak Russian as a native language as part of our Ukrainian response program as well, and the social inclusion programs. So that made things an awful lot easier for us. And one of the things we found in workshops is that some people didn't want to speak Russian as a matter of principle. And they just wanted us to focus on Ukrainian. But it wasn't possible for us to do that because we didn't have the resources. So we just said, okay, please, we just had to ask them to try and accept that our resources weren't able to do that. But the other beautiful thing was that there were people who spoke English, and they were very happy to translate for us, which ultimately helped them with their CVs and references as well, which is an unintentional. So the first aspect was obviously to prepare research, and the research wasn't just to, I suppose, like satisfy the requirements of an application for funding. It was also that we wanted to be able to provide facts and figures and education to people in the entire community, from educators, voluntary community organizations, people who were involved with migrants, and this was something that we were able to share with everybody. And we started out with doing focus groups with people who were in direct provision centres, because their voice was the one that mattered the most. And we wanted to gauge what their awareness was of GCE and the SDGs. Well, and this was the similar questions that we asked at volunteer centres and community organisations. And what we found is that they all know what the SDGs were. They didn't know what GCE was, and they didn't understand the link between active citizenship and volunteering. So those were things that came out as well from the research. And the other thing we found with SDGs, particularly from people from disadvantaged backgrounds, is that they found it very capitalist in nature. So, for example, they may care about the environment, but people who have sought refuge in another country have done so because there is a risk to their lives for some reason, whether it's they're escaping climate atrocities or war, food poverty, threats to life. So their priorities are not the climate. Their priority are safety, even though they may care about it. And there were several discussions had about, like, no matter what SDG exists, it depends on people with money to bring them in. So that was an interesting one. And these came from people who were from Nigeria and Brazil, who brought up those interesting topics. So with that in mind, then we issued our recommendations and findings, and that did is that it supported us to write or training materials for ACE practitioners. So what I've given you here is a link to the Connecting Cultures Fostering Integration through GCE report. And it gives you a good understanding of what the situation is like in Meath, but also what the people that we're aiming to support, how they feel about it, and what it is they actually want out of a program like this. So when we were doing the GCE training, the first aspect was kind of a train the trainer that we developed. And we did two things. We based it on the research, and we also incorporated using the CELTA book for Train the Trainers as well on development education. Now, again, because of what we had, we also had to be selective on what we used from that, and we also developed then our own activities to support it. And the overall objective was to bring about awareness. And we had community educators, youth workers, we have people who are in ETBs, and And everybody that was involved worked with people that were from the community at risk in some way, including people in direct provision. We brought down Bobby McCormick from Development Perspectives, and we had some great workshops. I think as well what made it more interesting is that made it very activity based rather than like talking non-stop. And because we had people from lots of different cultures as well, I think a key aspect for the GC, for the Train the Trainer, is that we got everybody to give some sort of presentation about their culture and their understanding of the SDGs. So we had great conversations around that as well. And the second iteration then was in training people in direct provision centres with not just the objective of GCE awareness, but also to prepare them for volunteer sessions. So we felt it was important that they became aware of GCE and the background to this, particularly when it came to the active citizenship, how they can be agents of change. So they were two new things. And again, because things that changed so much with the occupancy in direct provision, or participants were, I'd say, around 95% Ukrainian. And the main thing that came out of that is that volunteering was not part of their culture. So it was great to have about 50 people in this situation with us in our classes, and it was genuinely new information. They understood a lot of the aspects of it, but it never dawned on them or in their communities to actually put it into action. So what we were doing was giving them the incentives and motivation to be volunteers, and not just to bolster their CVs, for embedding them in the community and getting references, but because they would understand what they were actually contributing for their own personal well-being, for inclusion in the community, which obviously again will contribute to personal and professional well-being as well. And it's something that they can have with them for the rest of their lives. So again, in line with SDGs, we actually picked trying to link it to any sort of environmental volunteering. So we approached the likes of Tidy Towns, biodiversity organisations such as Sonarta in Laytown that you may be familiar with, fantastic organisation, but also for more inclusion as well with parish activities, and we had several people get involved in like in cleanups around church grounds and projects like that, because faith is very important as well to so many of the Ukrainians. So we hit a double axis there in terms of the volunteering. The volunteers then themselves, after we did 4 workshops with them, which took twice as long because we had to translate everything. So we had to factor that in as well. It was fun because you actually had no idea what they were saying, and it is crucial to have somebody that actually understands the context of what you are saying as well. So citizenship education is a difficult one to translate, but once we got some familiarity with it, and the 2 people that were working with us were fantastic. They actually went off and did a little bit of research by themselves using the United Nations and how it translated into Ukrainian and Russian. So things like that were a fantastic help for us and the participants. So there is something that I have to admit that I'm very proud of. Because the women came back to us and they said that people who are retired, male or female, they don't do anything. They don't get involved in social activities. They don't go out. They don't play bingo. They just go to each other's houses. They may have coffee. There's no community kind of programs or anything like that for senior citizens. So I got chatting with the ICA, the president of Meath, Meath ICA, and what emerges that they actually had wanted to get involved in some way to support people in direct provision, but they just didn't know how to go about it. So we just arranged a meeting and an introduction with some of the ladies, and several things happened. Is that they were so happy to have this kind of thing available for them. They'd never experienced anything like it. But if we look at our traditional age makeup of the ICA, it's usually senior citizens, all around the country, and we're looking at knitting and crochet and flower arranging. But so many of the women that have joined this are in their 30s, 40s plus retirement age. So in addition to having a women's group, it has actually rejuvenated the ICA in Meath itself, because it's brought in some young people. It's also serving as, I suppose, like a pilot project for ICA guilds around the country, because they're watching this, they don't know how it would work, and all going according to plan, there will actually be the first ever guild in a direct provision centre itself. And all of the ladies, they are still involved, even though the Connecting Cultures programme has officially finished, but they're also going to bring this home to Ukraine as well, all of the age groups, so I mean, it is absolutely, it's just absolutely brilliant to see. And we get invitations all over the place to go to various events, but until the event somewhere where we can sort of get there, like Dr. Spock or something like that, where we can't be everywhere. So they're doing tours the whole time, and so the people in the centres actually have a great social aspect of this as well. So getting out of the centres. Another great thing that happened was actually with a coffee morning. And this was an initiative that they established themselves. And we were doing work with the Stamullen GAA, and they actually have a fantastic centre there where people can come in and, like have events and things like that. But what we didn't realise at the time is that they actually have cooking facilities. And the one thing that everybody, particularly the women, they miss cooking. They miss the simple thing like being able to prepare a lunch or cook dinner for their families, or even to actually to be able to make themselves tea and toast. They can't do that in the majority of the facilities, especially the larger ones. So to have, not only have they been able to cook and absolutely have a ball in the kitchen, I've never seen anybody work like them. They bring in people from the community, community organisations, neighbours down the road, and what they do is through food, coffee and treats, they sit down to have chats and the crack and storytelling and learning about each other's culture. And it's actually having a huge benefit. And it's also great as well for the GAA, because they're able to say, yeah, that they're facilitating inclusion, because the GAA themselves, they have inclusion officers in every county. So that's had a huge benefit as well. And the ladies love the cooking again and the social aspect. And the same with Tidy Towns, you can see the picture there at the bottom. Again, it's bringing in younger people. But this particular one here is that they love entering competitions. And so now they've got extra people to help, and extra people who are able to do more of the work that some of their older people may not have been physically able to do as well. So they're hoping now to sort of put other competitors in the area to shame and to get cracking on things like that. And it really has been a fabulous thing to be a part of there as well. So we have other ones as well that people want to get on board for the next iteration of the Connecting Cultures programme. So it really has inspired other community organisations as well, and we hope to get more people from some of the other direct provision centres. So the last thing we did is that we prepared a lessons learned toolkit based on the last year's activities. And key to this is that we involved everybody again, for people who participated in the course, so they could actually tell people, well, actually, no, you might have a good idea, but this is how it should be, because we're the recipients. So that is also available online. And last but not least, we also brought down our funders, and that's Maria Reardon there from Irish Aid. And she actually observed what the outcome of the project, and she could see the fun and the friendships and the impact, and people were queuing up to take photographs of her. So the biggest thing, I suppose, like with outcome is going forward again, like it's sectoral support. That's what's made it a success. The community engagement. And as I said, other organisations want to host volunteers and also want to avail of GCE training. So, for example, I see across the country, they want to avail of training going forward for GCE. And we have a queue of people waiting to volunteer from direct provision centres around Meath. And conveniently, Goramagat, Spasiba, and Yakoyu.